going on, everybody? This is Bobby G, aka Bobby Bookworm, back again with another Saturday Shpiel, as always. This week, it is Parashat Nitzvayim. Nitzvayim means you are standing. And this is getting closer to the end of Deuteronomy. There's only a couple of days, actually, before Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah starts here, actually, quite soon. In a couple of days, to be exact. Sundown tomorrow. The passages this week are from Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 9 to chapter 30, verse 20. Isaiah chapter 61, verse 10 to chapter 63, verse 9. And it is also John chapter 12, verses 41 through 90 from TorahPortions.org. And from Chosen People Ministries, John chapter 15, verses 1 through 11. And the one common theme that happens across all these passages is abiding in God and living. Because in Parashat Nitzvayim, there is essentially a renewing of the covenant and a cutting of the covenant, not just with those who are the children of Israel who are abiding with Moses that particular day that he is giving his farewell address, if you will. But it is also a reminder that this is not just for them, but it's for those who are not with them, right? Meaning the ages or the descendants to come. And the thing that keeps coming to mind is to abide in God and live. Because to not abide in God is to die. To follow God's mitzvot, which means to follow His commandments, to follow His Torah, as the first 5 books are known as, or sometimes the Old Testament is known as Torah. And it is to abide in God, to abide in His Word, to abide in His love, to abide in everything that He says. And they have a choice in Deuteronomy. It's like here you have life and death, blessing and cursing. It says, be careful that there is no bitter root that takes hold of you. Lest if the bitter root takes hold of you, you fall away from God and are destroyed because you chose not to put your faith in God and to not follow His word, but instead decided to go after those which are not God's, but are images of metal and stone, and so be destroyed. And in Isaiah, we find the word of the Lord, where he speaks of the Spirit of God is upon me to preach the good news. That is the Besorah, is how you have good news in Hebrew, is Besorah, or gospel, which we get as gospel, which is Greek for good news. And God talked about one who came, who to proclaim this word robes looked red as if drenched in grapes. And as asked, why is your robes drenched in grapes? And he talked about the day of wrath that was prepared for those who did not follow him, and that even those who turned around and decided to follow him, that they would be blessed. And in the book of John, chapter 12, we have many people who trusted in Jesus but wouldn't say it openly because they didn't choose to be put out of the synagogue, which is they didn't want to be put out of the synagogue, or they didn't want to be put out of the four-wall church. Hint, hint. And the thing is that they considered that the glory of men was to be more important than the glory of God, which is problematic. Because if you look at that, to be having a church that considers the glory of God more important than the glory of man is a problematic church. Just like then it would have been problematic as far as the synagogue is concerned. And in the case of what we have with John 15, Jesus talks about, or Yeshua, as his name would have been in Hebrew, to abide in his love. And then he speaks the words given to him from the Father. Now we know that Jesus is God in the flesh, the second part of the Trinity, but that's a divine mystery that takes a lot of time to break down. That being said, we have to understand that anything that Jesus does, he does as God the Son, he does of God the Father. He does the Father's will, not his own, but the will of the Godhead in and of itself, in its entirety, and the will of heaven. So that's something we have to understand. And if we abide in his love, he says, if you do my commandments, you will abide in my love, and you will show the world that you are my disciples indeed. And it's not that deeds equal salvation, but they are an outpouring of the fact that we have been saved and that we choose to follow Yeshua, Jesus. So my word for this week is to abide in the love of God, abide in the peace of God, abide in the life of God. Because to abide in the Lord, in a relationship with the Lord, and to follow the commandments, that is the word of the Lord, which is this, to do so is to abide in his word and to love him and to do these things out of love. But to not do these things and to not be in a relationship with God is to be cursed. So says the word. And Jesus says, I didn't come to judge the world, but to save the world. And I didn't come to judge because the word that I spoke will judge the one who faces judgment because I spoke and people just didn't choose to follow it. So it's not Jesus' choice of whether or not we're condemned or not, or whether we choose to abide in him or not. It's not his choice whether we abide in Jesus or not. It's our choice. So the question is, what choice will you make this day? This is Bobby Bookworm. This is my Saturday Shpiel. God willing, I'll be with you guys next week. Shalom.